Hey everyone, why don't we go ahead and get started with kind of preliminary introductions, all that sort of stuff. And I do expect more people to be joining us, but they can catch up. Um, they're not going to be surprised by who's here and what's going on. Oh, we just lost Guy. I bet he'll be back. Okay, so let me. There he is. Guy's back. Um, Let me just, I guess, start by saying this is a follow-up meeting from our November meeting on on-street parking, where we had Mingo Gomes of the Hartford Parking Authority and Mike Looney of Department of Public Works. Talk to us a little bit about what was going on in the neighborhood, and get the community's feedback. And it sounds like they've taken that feedback in and developed a plan to address some of the concerns that were brought up last time. Hold on one second. Let me put in dial in stuff for Guy so we can have audio. Oh, there it is. Gannon got it. Thank you, Gannon. And really today, the goal is to go over the updated plan and make sure that we get the information out in the communities, and to the extent people are here and want to ask questions. We are recording this session because it is actually school vacation week, and there are some folks who are out of town because of that, who care about this conversation. So it is going to show up on the YouTube channel for the West End Civic Association, hopefully, fingers crossed, as something that people can watch in retrospect. So with that, I guess let me see if Guy has audio. And oh, here comes Guy on the phone. So let's see if Guy has anything he wants to add before we get into this. You have to unmute one of them, Guy.
Sorry, having some technical difficulties. I didn't hear any of it, but you guys can just go ahead and continue. I can hear you now.
You didn't hear any of it. Okay, super. Okay, so
sorry.
No, that's fine. I don't know, Mike, Mingo, which one of you wants to go first, but I think the goal is to just share what you've put together and talk about it.
Okay, well, thank you, Kyle. I'll lead off, and Mingo will jump in where appropriate. So we've been spending some time over this winter period evaluating the situation, not only in the West End, but through all the neighborhoods in the city as well, and particularly as it relates to the signage regarding parking on sanitation collection days. And we've done quite a bit of brainstorming, and have done a sign inventory that's substantially complete. It's pretty much wrapped up now for the western side of the city. So your Wednesday and Thursday trash collection routes. What I think I'll do is I'll just jump right into the brief 8-slide PowerPoint presentation I have. If I can just go ahead and share my screen. You could just let me do that. All right, there we go. All right, so just go to the, all right, can everybody see that? All right, good. So just to kind of summarize the background and the nature of the issue that we've been wrestling with here, the city of Hartford, our recycling and waste collection folks, and our streets division crews who man our street sweeping trucks and help run that operation. They need a reasonably clear street environment to really complete the routes in a timely manner and to do things like street sweeping operations picking up bulky waste, all sorts of things like that. To do it really well and do it efficiently, we need to have as many cars out of the way as we can feasibly get. But we're very cognizant of the fact that throughout the city, and especially in certain neighborhoods, the West End, parts of the West End falling into that category, on-street parking is a very critical resource for residents, particularly in buildings that have a number of apartment units in them, but may not have a tremendous amount of off-street parking available to them. The street becomes your de facto parking for your unit, and different, of course, than in a suburban community. So we are aware of that and want to kind of treat that with due amount of respect. In addition, we have a combination, we have a combination of out of date, inaccurate, in some cases missing, faded, worn out signage that can really be a source of confusion for not only residents, but folks coming in from outside the city to visit friends and relatives, and to just park in our neighborhoods, go to the parks and things like that. And all of this combined with a lack of parking alternatives it's really caused a considerable amount of frustration for folks, especially folks who have received parking tickets from HPA for being parked on the street during a sanitation day for that particular area. So we kind of came up with an action plan, beginning with looking at the Wednesday and Thursday sanitation routes as sort of a pilot, and then making tweaks as necessary, seeing how things played out with this plan, and then working on expanding it to the rest of the city once we had evaluated and kind of worked out the bugs in the system. As I alluded to before, we've already basically completed our inventory of street signage, and this not only includes the signage for collection days, but and the parking restrictions related to that, but also other signs, missing one-way signs, faded stop signs, school crossing signs. We've tried to do this holistically and clean up all the signage while we're in the process of doing this this project, so that we can try to get everything straightened out. It's probably two decades overdue, so it was something we definitely needed to do, and it's certainly worth our time to do it while we're doing the parking for sanitation collection days. And what we went back and forth with a number of ideas about, alternate side parking, and a couple of other ideas about, possibly using blue light lots and things like that. But one thing that became clear from all the interactions that we've had, not just at the November meeting, but in conversations that have occurred since then over the winter, is that what folks are really looking for is parking that is reasonably close to where they live, that they can easily walk to in a reasonable amount of time, and not have to go a considerable distance to get their cars when they need to go back and forth from their house. But at the same time, I think most of our residents are very aware of our needs to collect trash and recycling and bulky waste, and to keep the streets clean. And so we wanted to kind of reach some sort of kind of like a compromise position. So what we've come up with is we've developed some parking zones within these two sanitation route districts, the Wednesday and the Thursday, where you will have a street that will not be signed for parking related to sanitation day. So if your day is Wednesday for your collection of your trash and recycling, there are certain streets you will be able to park on, and you will not get a warning, you will not get a ticket, you will be left entirely alone. And these are streets that we've sort of selected based upon a number of criteria: streets that have a small number of customers served, or residential properties served. Some of our streets that have more multifamily residential that have their own private trash and recycling collection through one of the other commercial waste haulers. where our trucks don't actually have to service too much of that street. And then areas along things like parks, bordering the parks. A good example is the side of the east side of Girard Avenue as you go past the law school. That's an area where we see it just being a free parking zone on the Thursday sanitation collection day. And we developed these maps highlighting these zones for Wednesday and Thursday, which I'll show after this slide. And as part of this, we wanted to also design and install some very clear and concise signage that also enables the average person who's just coming upon the sign and may not be familiar with what day is trash day. Most of our residents are very well aware of what day is trash day, but if someone is unfamiliar, there's actually going to be a QR code on the sign that's linked back to a web page that contains all of our sanitation rules. It will have copies of the maps, so people can pull them up on their phone and see where they can park legally on that particular sanitation day, and just give as much information as we can to someone right there in the field. That is something that we are going to be working on installing over the next 3 months, hopefully wrapping that up by about May. There is quite a bit of signage to put up, quite a bit of signage to take down. So it's going to be an ongoing process as we work our way into mid-spring. For warnings and tickets, the warnings are going to be ongoing, continuing in most areas, but we're going to be stopping them immediately after we receive NRZ feedback. Of course, Thursday's route extends up into Blue Hills, parts of Asylum Hill, and then even a little bit on Wednesday's route goes into Frog Hollow and just the northern edge of Behind the Rocks. So we want to talk to those NRZs as well and get their feedback on the streets that we've identified as parking zones. And again, here's an example of what will come with warnings now. And Mingo, if you want to jump in here and talk a little bit about this, this is how we're starting to introduce the QR code in terms of familiarizing folks with the different parking rules for collection days.
Absolutely, and thank you, Michael, and thank you, everybody. This is, I think it's a piece of paper that's roughly 4x4, and it will be provided at the same time that we give warnings, and it basically tells people that why you're receiving the warning, and it also allows you the opportunity to scan the QR code, which will which take you directly to the page within the 311 community engagement section, which is also the Hartford Parking, the Hartford, Connecticut Gov/sanitation page, which provides you with a host of information. In this code, this is for the entire city. This is not just for the West End. This is for the entire city. So as Michael said, after we have these discussions next week, these will be starting on every sanitation day. We will be leaving these with the warnings, and where we will stop giving warnings is going to be in those areas that are identified as parking zones, which Michael will show on the maps coming up shortly.
Thanks, Mingo. And by having this done by May, what we intend to do is use the month of June as kind of a grace period for everyone to still get familiar with the streets where they can park and gradually adapt their parking and commuting ways to these streets for legal parking. And then beginning July 1st, we would go back to our traditional ticketing operations in the Wednesday and Thursday collection route areas. So this is kind of a mock-up of what the sign is looking like. It has the no parking, 7 a.m. to 1 p.m. We did not put a specific day. That's for a couple of reasons. Number one, if sometime in the future the days were to change, we'd have to replace all the signs again. So that's something we'd like to avoid having to do. And we've mentioned operations, not just waste collection, because operations sort of encompasses the whole gamut of things that we do, from not just traditional trash and recycling bins, but also that bulky waste, the mattresses, and the street sweeping, which is a critical part of the operations. And then we'd have the QR code here down at the bottom, as Mingo discussed. These are two maps. I'm going to actually get out of this presentation and pull them up as individual PDFs so we can zoom in a little bit more. But they show in yellow highlight the streets where parking would be allowed on sanitation collection days. So we have on the Wednesday routes are on the left and Thursday on the right. So what I will do now is just jump out of there and see if I can pull up the let's try this. There we go. So this is Wednesday's route. You can see we start at the top is Farmington Avenue. So parking would be permitted on Farmington, also this stretch of Evergreen coming down to Warrenton, about half of Warrenton going from the Prospect Avenue town line over to Rodney Street, and the Rodney and Regent would also be available for parking. Capitol Ave, a little further to the south, would also be available, as would Newton Street to help service these streets in here, and Park Street down along the bottom, and then Orange Street along the eastern edge. I won't get too much into the Frog Hollow neighborhood, but we also have streets identified over there where folks will be able to legally park. And now I will just move this down and go to Thursdays. And again, Thursday extends way up into Blue Hills, and we'll be discussing those streets with the Blue Hills NRZ. But here is the area for the West End, north of Farmington Avenue, which is the Thursday portion of the West End. So again, Elizabeth Street along the park, along the East Lawn, Whitney Street, again, adjacent to the park. Girard going from Elizabeth all the way down past Fern, actually, until you start getting to the single family homes a little bit, about halfway down that block from Fern to Farmington. And then that small piece of Sherman where I think a lot of the UConn students currently park next to the soccer field. The portion of Fern along this stretch over here going from Oxford over to Prospect, and then again, Farmington Avenue to the south, and also Tremont Street going along the school. I know that one is, that Cone Tremont area is an area of considerable discussion. So obviously we can discuss that in greater detail when we get to Q&A. But these are kind of what we are laying out now as what we think would make good locations. I will go back into my PowerPoint actually and wrap it up there. So just to summarize how this impacts the street sweeping, recently we had synced up all of our rebalanced sanitation routes with our sweeping routes so that they were on the same page and not talking two different languages. Ideally, we try to run 4 sweepers a day. Of course, between staffing and equipment issues that come up, this can fluctuate, usually anywhere from 2 to 4. But sometimes the equipment is down. Sometimes a key staff member is out on workers' comp or on vacation for 2 weeks. Things come up where we have to make some adjustments. So it's not always guaranteed 4 sweepers a day. It can vary depending upon equipment and staffing conditions. But basically, our commitment is to make sure that we sweep each residential street at least 2 times monthly. And so there may be a week when trash is collected, but you don't see a sweeper come down. The street that may be because one of the sweepers is currently in the repair bay, and we're going to try to get it back up as fast as we can and then hit that street the following week. But we're fairly confident that we'll be able to do 2 good sweepings of every residential street per month. The major corridors like Farmington, Capitol, Asylum, those are already on their own monthly sweeping schedules that we do on 3rd shift between 11 p.m. and 7 a.m. So those we've already got covered through a different part of our sweeping program. The street, one of the questions that when we were talking about this, well, what do we do about the streets that are designated parking zones? Are they just never going to get swept? Obviously don't want to have that happen. A significant portion of the streets that we chose are ones that I think are kind of low frequency sweeping locations for us. Streets we go down where we think, we really don't need to be sweeping this street as often as we are, because there's not a lot of litter generated on that street. It doesn't have a lot of trash receptacles or people putting out a large number of cans. A number of reasons that we selected these streets, and this is one of them. So what we would end up doing is, over the course of the 3 seasons when we normally do sweeping, spring, summer, and fall, we would try to hit those streets 4 times during those 3 seasons. So probably once in the spring, twice in the summer, 1 more time in the fall, not including when we do a full sweep for a spring cleanup or a leaf collection in the fall, but 4 independent times. And I think what I'm going to do is kind of run that a little bit like the city of New Haven does, where they will actually put up paper signs that give people several days advance notice that, if it's on Friday, they'll put up a sign that says, next Tuesday sweeping, no parking on this street. And we'll make sure that lines up so it's not occurring on the same day as the sanitation day for that street, so that they're not being utilized as parking zones, and try to tackle them that way. That's probably the most efficient way to handle making sure that those streets get swept. So that is basically a summary of our street sweeping component, and happy to take any questions. I know that was quite a bit of information, so love to hear what folks think.
All right, maybe.
Sorry, do you want us just to talk, or you want us to raise hands and be called on?
Well, yeah, Rafe, why don't you raise hands? But why don't there are a couple questions in the chat. If you could, Mike, take a quick look at that and see if there's any there to quickly respond to, and then we'll go to new questions.
Okay, Heather Finn has a good point here that a lot of the St. Francis employees park on the east side of Girard now because their parking garage is being rebuilt, and their employees don't have a whole lot of parking options. That's something we can look into as well. I'll talk to, I don't know if you know anything about that, Mingo.
I actually do. I'll reach out to St. Francis. I know that they have some parking arrangements where they shuttle people in, and some people are not keen on a shuttle and they try to find parking anywhere that makes sense for them. But we did the same thing given Woodland Drive. So I'll reach out to St. Francis to see if Girard if they could message that Girard is being utilized and if people could park in their designated areas.
Okay, sounds good. Gannon had a question. Gannon Long, will you be towing cars who park in the wrong places? Mingo, I believe the answer is no, we're just ticketing.
That is correct.
Okay. And then Daniel Kelman, I think Daniel is referring to our sign, our mock-up, that waste collection, the word waste collection is off center. Yes, it is. So we'll make sure when we print them up that everything is got the right margins on it.
I'd appreciate that. Thank you. And I would cringe looking at that every time if it was printed like that.
If I put up 700 of them, I'd cringe too. So-
If I may, before you open it up to the rest of the board, I just want to mention that this is just, it's not just about sanitation, as Michael mentioned, and I don't want to kind of sidestep. This is really about looking at all of the signs that need to be refurbished. It's also about looking how streets are being used. And Michael and I, along with the mayor, are on the same page as far as eliminating odd even where necessary, where possible, to eliminate the need for residents to get up on a Tuesday morning to move their car and again on a Friday. So it's really about looking at all the signs and all the way the streets are being used as we are doing sanitation at the same time.
Okay,
Thanks,
great. And then just in the chat again, Gannon follows up with, you're not towing, but the signs show a tow truck. So that's potentially confusing to people.
Another comment, I also find people constantly get confused by the holiday schedule. Guaranteed every week there's a holiday and trash is delayed one day, half the block doesn't know it or forgets it.
We had that happen the last two weeks because
Yeah, this
very
week.
few places get Lincoln's birthday off. Most people don't know when Lincoln's birthday is anymore. And we tried to put out as much information through social media, through Facebook, that the 13th was a holiday, but we still got a significant volume of calls and people kind of confused as to why their trash hadn't been picked up, and they were okay once we explained it to them, but we did have to answer a lot of those calls. So that's why that's another reason why I didn't want to put a day on the signs, because then someone will say, well, it's it says on the sign Monday, it doesn't say anything about what your list of holidays are. But again, that's something we can include in the QR code with the link, is the list of city holidays, so folks can also know what's going on in that regard.
So just to clarify on that point, the intention is for the signs as designed to indicate whatever day you're collecting the sanitation, whether that's, a normal week, Wednesday, Thursday, depending on where you are in the neighborhood, or a holiday delay week, there's no parking on the collection day, right? And now by not having a date listed on the sign, that's intended to allow enforcement of people who do park on, Dan, in your area on a Friday of this week, because that's the collection day.
Right.
Okay. Rafi, go ahead.
I've got a couple questions. I'm sorry I came in late, so I don't know if I missed anything, but anyway, I'll try. First of all, in relation to what you just said, Mike, about the holiday issue, I don't understand how the people who would be parking would know. You're taking the days of the week off. So right now, at least if it says Wednesday, you know that you're supposed to stay off on Wednesday. But on a week with a Monday holiday, you're supposed to stay off on Thursday or risk whatever the sanctions are for parking. How would I know, or a guest know, or anybody else know in a holiday week that Thursday is the day? There's nothing on the sign. They'd have to know that they're going to use a QR code. Is QR code the only way they would be able to figure this out? And they would have to kind of be preemptive by every time they park checking the code? I don't understand how they would know.
If I may, I think the trash cans on the street are the giveaway. If you have trash cans on the street that are full and they weren't picked up on the regular day, then the next day when they're there being picked up, that is the only way you can tell. You have trash cans on the next day that are being picked up.
So you learn that after the fact. You won't know that before the fact. You'll only know that after the fact by wondering why your trash can is sitting out there for 2 days before it was picked up. That doesn't help you for the next holiday. I'll
it's-
tell you, the only way I ever found what the city holidays were was pay a personal visit to the HR office and ask them for the memo that the employees got. And I keep that on my refrigerator, and I know it's the same 24 holidays, even if it's a different date.
You know,
They're-
my worries about the, my
Probably
worries about the,
didn't.
I'm
ahead.
sorry, my worries about the sanctions. So I'm glad you're not towing. I'm glad that it's a ticket, not a tow, because it's easier to protest the ticket. But it's, I'm not sure what the solution is if you can't do it with signage. But it could be that you function in some sort of a grace period mode where it's not the normal day. So perhaps you don't ticket people on a week that they were supposed to know that the day was Thursday and not Wednesday. You know, so it's no big deal if people keep their car off the street on Wednesday and it turns out there was no garbage pickup. But the problem is that they put it out on Thursday. Or they park in the wrong place on Thursday because they didn't know, and then they get the same ticket, even though they were being good on Wednesday. And it's especially true because my next question is about apartment buildings, but it's especially true in apartment situations where the tenants don't put the garbage out. I mean, like I put my own garbage out, so I sort of know which day is garbage day. If you're a renter and your landlord deals with the garbage, you really may have no idea what day it is. Why would you even pay attention to that? So, I mean, would you consider the possibility of not imposing the sanction in those weeks when the schedule is off? Or you could, I mean, you can also have what about when it snows and you don't have a pickup one day during the week, so it's completely unplanned. Because it throws you off and you come a day late. Right. I would just assume you would not ticket somebody because they parked there the day after, because they didn't know that everything was delayed by one day.
That's an interesting point about the when we have heavy snowstorms and we kick sanitation down a day. That's something we should probably put our heads together on and think about a little bit.
Currently today, because we do not ticket on holiday days. So when there's a holiday, we tend to not today.
So when you said you don't ticket on holiday, Mingo, when you say don't ticket on holiday days, you mean the other days?
That is correct.
Week, not on
the holiday. So if there was a holiday on Monday, and it was simply because the sign said that this exactly to what you're saying. So now the collection's on the following day and it doesn't correlate with the sign. So currently today, we don't enforce on that off day because there was a holiday and or a snowstorm. Right. So I think we can continue on that path.
Okay, so because you're going to take the day off the sign, so you'll no longer, there will be no day on the sign. Okay, so you're saying no ticketing, that's fine. When you were picking out the parking zones, did you look at where the apartment buildings were? Did that play any role? And if so, what kind of role did that play? Because that's where you have the greatest concentration of people who don't have a place to park on the street, or rather a park off the street, and are going to have to park on the street.
Yes, we did look at that. And the example of, I think, Evergreen Avenue between Farmington and Warrenton was an area where, just going up and down that street most days myself, you have a lot of those kind of medium-sized apartment buildings, not our big 200 under 30 unit complexes. And I was kind of thinking the same thing, that this is a street that we probably have a lot of people who live on this street who are going to need to park, and they're also, their buildings are generally serviced by private waste haulers. So we don't have to spend much time on Evergreen with our crews. And if there's 4 or 5 smaller unit apartment buildings or single family homes that we have to service, we can just go down with, we don't have to worry about doing a side loader. We can switch a rear loader truck that has guys on the back of the truck who can get off and move the cans around. It's not like the sidearm where you have to try to wiggle it between two cars and try not to damage anyone's property. So yes, that did play a role in at least the selection of some of the streets.
So is what you're saying, I mean, I don't have the map in front of me now, but is what you're saying that it was more likely that you might have declared the street in, say, in front of a multifamily building, you might have made that into a parking zone?
Yes, in certain instances, yeah. I mean, just again, living in the neighborhood and driving around it every day, I was able to kind of pick out with, you know, Mingo knows the streets better than anybody else. We were able to pick out those areas where we thought it would work the best. It's not 100% perfect in terms of it was only streets that had apartment buildings, larger or not larger, you know, medium-sized apartment complexes on it, but other streets where we only had a few number of customers that we serviced with city forces, those were other streets that we identified. And then obviously along some of the boundaries to the parks like Elizabeth Park and then alongside the law school where we don't have any trash collection as it is, those just kind of seem to make logical sense. And the distribution turned out to be pretty good in terms of sprinkling them around the neighborhood that way.
If I could also add, there was, you know, even though the streets that you see in front of you, we're representing them, but Michael's supervisors who managed the sanitation crew were the ones that had a hand in selecting the streets, just to make sure that they had the ability to pick trash and move it while cars were parked.
Did you use any kind of a rule of thumb for like a maximum distance that somebody would have to move their car? I mean, I noticed stuff, for example, there's some areas north of Farmington where it looks like you'd have to move the car a fairly substantial distance if you were parking on the street. It may be that those are areas where people have off-street parking, and so it doesn't really matter. But I was just wondering if there was some, were you like trying to make it so nobody would have to go more than half a block, or what was there a guideline of some sort that you were using?
I don't know if it was so much a rule of thumb. It was, you know, just visually how you can tell looking at the map where, you know, where there would be a large gap between two streets that were designated as parking zones, and maybe someone in the middle of that that kind of parking bubble would have to go a significant distance. We really did it by the feedback, as Mingo said, from my folks who were actually out in the trenches every day collecting the trash and the recycling, their input, Mingo's knowledge of the parking situation throughout the neighborhood, and then my own knowledge of the neighborhood as well, knowing which places have more multifamily units and where we tend to have fewer residential customers that we service. We didn't really follow a specific, we're going to keep 95% of people from having to move their car more than 2 blocks or anything like that. We didn't really get into that depth of geospatial analysis.
And I guess just one last question for now anyway. For the parking zones, you said you'll just do them, you'll sweep them 4 times a year. I mean, I'm sort of assuming that while some parking zones might be parked fairly frequently, probably most of the parking zones are not actually parked on the non-pickup days.
Mm-hmm.
But the sweeping is always going to be on a pickup day. Is that so that the reason for not simply picking up and doing an occasional sweep of the parking zones is because you'd have to send the sweeper on a separate route? I mean, it seemed like there'd be plenty of times you could adequately sweep the parking zones, but I guess now that I'm putting 2 and 2 together, it would mean you couldn't do it on the day of the regular sweeping.
That's correct, because the sweepers have to go to the next day. and sweep those zones. They can't really backtrack and do these parking zones the day after the collection day because they're needed in the next day's operation. And we're able to do, we do on third shift, as I mentioned, the longer major corridors, which it works out pretty well. Doing residential streets on third shift, I'm a little leery of doing that, number one, because it can disturb people in the middle of the night. And also you would have to move your car the night before, right, and then try to get over to your car first thing in the morning. It's not an ideal situation for people.
No, you would, in the way I see it, you would actually have to go around the cars. There'd be spots you would miss.
Yeah.
Because you would not, I mean, it wouldn't be posted in a way that people would know.
Right.
All right. I guess maybe I don't have a solution on that. Okay, I'll let somebody else. Thank you for the opportunity to ask the questions.
Sure, thank you.
All right, Mike, another question in the chat there about, well, at the bottom is work trucks. And then up above that, there's some more.
Okay, yep, from Gannon, looking at the Wednesday maps, don't know there's enough space for everyone on Beacon, Oxford, Tremont, and South Whitney to fit on Warrenton and Farmington. Did you all conduct a count to determine how much space would be needed? Short answer is no, we weren't able to conduct a count. I think the number of spaces we're going to need is going to vary from week to week, not by a huge amount, but there is going to be some flexibility in the numbers that we'll need. We just tried to grab as much linear footage of street space for parking that we could, given the the restrictions that we're working within in terms of operations, and we tried to do the best we could to at least provide some areas where folks could go. I can't guarantee 100% that we could fit everybody who might show up in the areas that we identified. We may be off by a certain factor, but I think we're reasonably close. And then recently, also from Gannon, HPA ticketed workers who were bringing heavy materials in and out of our house, not interfering with trash collection. For the streets where parking is banned on trash day, will work trucks get ticketed when they come to do work at homes in the neighborhood after July 1st, 2023, when the penalty tickets go into effect?
The answer is yes, and would ask that that if people are going to have work, they like we get all the time, that somebody call the Hartford Parking Authority, say, I'm going to have a truck in front of my house for a short period of time. They're going to be just emptying out their truck, then moving it, or they'll move it into the driveway when it's complete. Then we'll work with the residents.
Mingo, does anybody know that? This is news to me. You could call the parking authority and say you have a special circumstance. Could you not?
Yes, sir, that happens all the time.
Okay, I'm just saying I didn't know about it. I've been here for 40 plus years.
And again, not everybody has a special circumstance, but we get calls by churches, we get calls by funeral homes, we get calls by individual homes where their car breaks down and they can't move. And in those cases, we ask for either a tow or repair bill to verify that that there was work on the vehicle. But we try to work with the residents as best we can. But everybody needs to understand that what we're trying to do is get vehicles off the street during sanitation. So we're hoping that individuals and residents will work within that time frame to at least, if they have to move their own personal vehicle out of the driveway and let a truck into the driveway, we're asking that residents do the best that they can. But if we get a phone call, we will work with people.
Thank you. Is that number posted somewhere, or do you call 311?
No, they can write online, Hartford Parking Authority. They could call our local number and ask for somebody to have a discussion with it, myself and or the operations director we just hired.
Thank you for sharing that. That's the first time I ever heard that. I hadn't heard that offer ever before, so I'm glad that this meeting is being recorded and that that's publicly available information for everybody now. And I would encourage, Mike and Mingo, thank you for doing this presentation. I would encourage you guys, as you're doing these presentations, because I know you're going to continue talking to neighbors about this, I would encourage you to share that information and encourage people to call the HPA in advance. Like you said, it's definitely a much better solution. It's great to hear that you work with large groups. I didn't know that you guys had that offer for residents too. So I think it would make your jobs easier in the end if you let people know that in advance. Definitely a big takeaway from this conversation so far.
Thank you, Gannon.
So I'm wondering how much of the information people are going to get, people who are not at this meeting are going to get, for which they would use the QR code. I think there are a lot of people. Don't know even know what a QR code is, in my experience. Maybe just because I'm one of them that can't effectively use it at a restaurant. Is there? How do people figure this out?
Well, I mean, the QR code links back to a website, so that website stands alone. So if you don't have the capability to use the QR code or are not comfortable using that for any reason, we can certainly disseminate the website information as well. That's easy enough to do. We can work with Janice Castle in the mayor's office about getting that out.
How high off the street level is the QR code on a pole?
Mingo, how high are we installing the signs again?
The bottom of the sign has to be at the 7-foot mark to allow for traffic and cars to see it.
Okay.
That's why the placement of the QR code was right at the bottom of the sign.
At the bottom, so it'd be 7 feet off the ground.
7
Okay.
feet off the ground, but your camera or your phone should be able to zoom in on it and pick
You
it
can
up.
zoom in on an angle and get it. I mean, I just tried the QR code from this presentation and it took me right into the waste and recycling page. So it wasn't a mock-up, but that really works.
No, we actually have the right one on there. We've been working on this for a while.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Did the signs say anything? I just don't remember. Like, for more information, use QR code, or is that evident? Does everybody know that's what you're supposed to do?
Well, it says scan me, and usually a QR code, all QR codes at the bottom just say scan me, and typically people understand what that means.
Okay.
But there is no wording that says, scan the code to get more information.
Guy, did you have something you wanted to ask?
You are unmuted. No, I don't have anything to ask. I thought it was a good presentation.
I also like that there's I like the approach here. I'm not sure there's gonna be enough parking spots, but that's gonna be soon to be figured out. When this gets rolled out and people start using it, I'm sure it gets tweaked along the way. I feel that QR codes are becoming a lot more popular and very quickly. I see them popping out everywhere and all kinds of ads and restaurant applications, buses, things along those lines. I believe that people will start understanding them and how to use them more frequently as they're becoming a part of day-to-day usage. That's really my only comments.
All right, thank you. So let me follow up on something Guy said and just ask outright, is this plan open to evolution once we, see how many cars go into the parking zone and see what actually happens?
Absolutely. If we need if we need to tweak this, if we need to change streets, if there's one street that just is not working as a parking zone, we'll look at another one and we'll just keep adjusting it till we get what we need to get. So yeah, we're certainly open to to making additional changes as needed. And I think there probably will be some things that we just can't foresee that are only going to come out once you start rolling the program out and using it. That's when those things become self-evident. So certainly open to that.
Okay, and then, you know, part of that should be relatively simple of installing and removing signs as needed to indicate where the parking zones change and communicating to the residents, that sort of thing. One other question for you, which is, in our prior meeting, we had the president of the Noah Webster PTA on. She's not here today. Can you talk briefly about what the plan is with Noah Webster? It sounded like you were working with the school to address some of the teacher and staff parking concerns.
If I may on this one, Michael.
Yeah.
First, I want to answer Gannon's question about communication and training. We are launching and launched a 90-day training program for all new employees, and then we're rotating all of our employees through it with verbal and written reviews every 2-3 weeks. Tomorrow, as a matter of fact, after this meeting, I am having a meeting with all of the ambassadors, with all of the maps, all the QR codes, so that we could start this program and have it top of mind. And we will talk to our individuals on a weekly basis to make sure that they're aligned on, number one, where we are on signs, like this group will be. When we launch, we will bring them out to the site so that they could see the sign. So we're going to be working closely with our team to do that, which I agree we haven't done as well in the past. Secondly, Noah Webster, we've met with the principal 2 times. We are going to be creating a teachers parking program on Tremont. They have 83 administrators. They only have parking spaces for 23. Part of the plan, along with Sebastian Tata, who works for Michael Looney in traffic, we are going to also create drop-off zones for parents that coincide with buses. And then on Tremont, we're actually going to walk to every door, have a discussion with the residents, simply because we believe that by doing what we're planning on doing and then enforcing, that we will stop parents from parking in people's driveways while they're dropping off kids, leaving the car running, things of that nature. So, and the teachers' parking zone is going to be only during the school year, and then it's going to be during school hours, and then after school hours, you know, and on weekends and holidays, parking is available for everybody and anyone. So it's going to be a really great, I think, transition to accommodate specifically the teachers in that area, the residents of that area, and hopefully accommodate those parents that are bringing their children, which in today's day and age are more often than none, the ability to drop off their children safely without interfering with the parking and traffic of the neighborhood.
But isn't Tremont already the teacher parking zone? So how is that actually changing anything?
No, we're actually going to put up signs for a teacher's parking zone so that we protect parking for them during the school year. So we're going to organize the street to delineate, here's where teachers actually park, so that they're not here, there, and everywhere. And we're going to dedicate areas along with the school security on where parents can drop children off. The bus stops are where the bus stops are. We're going to make sure that those are well delineated. And it's just going to be much more organized from a staff at the school, from their security team, and then again with the sign to support that.
But it sounded from what you said like there weren't going to be enough spaces for all the teachers. Did I understand what you said?
No, there will be enough. Like I said, they have 83 teachers. They currently have 23 parking within the parking. We have to find roughly 60 parking spots that are dedicated to them during the school year so that they could come teach the children and then kind of coexist with the neighborhood.
But where would you find 63? I guess maybe I'm saying I don't understand where you'd get 63 spare parking spaces.
Well, we're going to be going on Tremont as a primary, and I believe that we could probably do both sides of Tremont. So we're getting our sign equipment up and running so that we could go back out there, do the measurements, put the signs up and get that rolling.
But then, so Tremont, both sides of Tremont will be a parking zone on pickup days?
I'll work with Michael on that.
Okay, I'm sorry,
Yeah, I mean, I think I mentioned this prior, that I live on the corner of Cone and Oxford, so I have a bird's eye view of the Tremont Cone parking situation. And I guess what I'm hearing is, even though Tremont is designated as a parking zone for residents, in fact, it will be reserved for teachers and parents to drop off on the sanitation collection day, and therefore won't really be available for the residents.
As much as we thought it would, and I'll work
Yeah.
with Michael on that on the
Okay.
side.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
my apologies for not keying in on that with Michael earlier.
No worries. I mean, that's why we're having these conversations,
Yeah.
to try to identify the hotspots and figure it out. And to me, my block, which is of Oxford Street, which is from Cone up to Fern Street, is predominantly multifamily buildings
Mhm.
where many of the tenants don't have off-street parking options. And then similarly, the block of Oxford Street from Fern up to Elizabeth, the east side of the street is predominantly multifamilies where the residents don't necessarily have off-street parking. So right now, all of those people, it appears to me, will be funneled to the segment of Fern Street, which is modest, between Oxford and Prospect, or Elizabeth Street. So, or Farmington Avenue, I guess. So that's, we'll see how it plays out. And I appreciate you offering to kind of circle back with Mike on that particular one. Thank you.
How much is a parking ticket?
$45.
So to the extent that to the extent that the system doesn't work and people end up having to park on the street and getting ticketed, they're basically looking at like a $45 a week bill.
I think we're going to be running the system a couple of weeks to see how it works, to see if we need to make adjustments. And if we proceed after 2-3 weeks, and then all of a sudden we find that we have a jam lock, we can always work with anybody that received the citation. But I think the important, I'm not sure how many people are actually going to be taking advantage of the parking zones. And I think that we need to run it a couple of weeks just to get that gut check to say how many people are actually moving their cars out onto that street. We really don't know what that number is right now. We're assuming it's going to be a lot, but I don't know what that number is.
Yeah, no, I understand. I think I'm just worried about something that's hard for all of us to control, which is that, I mean, you're talking to people here who are kind of interested in what's going on and sort of making themselves alert to what the problems may be, where the actual residents that we're talking about are not. I'm just trying to figure out how they're going to come to appreciate, other than by getting tickets. I mean, I guess eventually the tickets maybe become the form of notice, and so I'm hoping that the June, I guess is it June or May that you think is the month? Is it June? I mean, I hope that will work as a way of trying to teach people that they need not to park in certain places on certain days, because it seems like that's going to be the major form of community education is the tickets during that month. And I think from my perspective, I would certainly be interested in knowing if there is, knowing what the count is on really on every block for those months, as to how many warnings are issued and how many people are parking in the wrong place. Because what ought to happen, if things are working well, is that each week that number should go down. I mean, people should be learning, and fewer people parking in places they're not supposed to park. And if that's what sort of the data shows, that's encouraging. If the data were to show, for example, no change, that the last week of that month, you had as many as the first week. That's like a red flag that says something about this isn't working, because we're going to get into the next month and these are going to be real tickets. And we need to understand or figure out why it's not working. And I think we as WECA board members would want to know if the data is showing, it's kind of a lack of people absorbing the information. So I guess I would just make a request that you gather that information and then that you share that information with us, because it really suggests we need a further conversation on that topic. I really would like to avoid a situation in which we start hearing from people that they're getting these tickets and they don't understand that they really should have parked somewhere else to avoid that.
Right.
Then I think, in addition to that, I think that collectively we should have a communication plan so that, we're doing everything that we can to communicate along with WECA and any of your other outlets, so that we could get that word out. I do know that in some parts of the city, the warnings are working. People are calling. We're telling them that it's warning for sanitation. They are saying thank you. They're sharing it with their neighbors, and things are moving in certain parts of the city. So my feeling is that once we put up the signs and people see them, and hopefully there's participation at these meetings, and we try all to communicate, whether it's community engagement letter, whatever it may be, so that we could get the word out that says on sanitation day, please be off the street. Then, that's our best bet for success as a starting point.
So Kyle, maybe I've missed this, but just a suggestion. When over the next few months, when you're issuing the warnings, is it possible to accompany them with a list of the streets where parking after July 1, the parking zones will be available? So because that tells the affected people, the people who are getting the warnings, hey, here's where you'll be able to park after July 1, as a really direct one-on-one way to inform them. Is it possible to have the warning include a list of the parking streets that will be available after July 1?
The QR code and the website will have all of that information.
I know, I understand that, and that's fabulous, but it would be way better if you had it literally on the warning ticket. Is that feasible?
Well, we could change that. We could change that information as we transition in. We're going to continue to give warnings with those QR codes that give the information, and as we get closer, we could maybe change the message that says, here's the street you should be on. I think we could do that.
Yeah, I think that would, Kyle, what do you think? I mean, I think that would really be helpful to what Rafi's point is, which is you want to reduce the number of people getting tickets, so the people getting warnings, without having to use the QR code of the website, are directly told after July 1, here's where you park. I think that would be really helpful.
We could transition that.
Yeah, something else that might be done, I don't know if anybody would want to do this, is particularly in sort of the first couple of weeks in July, is the day before a pickup day, trash day, someone should go and leaflet the cars that are parked on the street in places that the next day they would not be allowed to park. I mean, the kind of leaflet that says you're parked in a zone that on the tomorrow is a trash pickup day, and you will not be able to park here between 7 and 1 tomorrow. That's a kind of information that's thrown in your face at a time when it's very, very relevant. I don't know who's going to do that, and I don't know that. I mean, I was just thinking if WECA had block captains like we did, 15 years ago, that would be a perfect block captain task. I don't know.
I think that would actually be a great job for Hartford Parking Authority to do, because instead what they do is they come the next morning and they roam around the neighborhood, or they sit on a block, or they do whatever and look for people to give warnings to. But I think for them to do something actually educational and helpful instead of, predatory would be really welcome. I really do.
Well, I'm not up in for that, with all honesty, Gannon. And with all honesty, we've been given
I didn't
warnings,
expect you to be
and
in
people
favor of
don't,
that
and
idea,
people,
Mingo.
and
I
people
know you
aren't
much
moving
better
off
than
the
that,
street.
obviously.
Now, again, and I'm unfortunately, I'm not taking on that one. I'll be more than happy to change the message when we're out there, but I'm not committing to being there the day before. I'm sorry, that I can't commit to.
No, I didn't think that you would. I did want to, can I just get back to Rafi's question about the data though? Because I think this is a really important point, and I don't know if Mike and Mingo got a chance to respond to it, which is that, are we going to be tracking, this is a pilot project, you guys said, so I'm presuming there's some level of data tracking of where the tickets are issued, how many, that this information could be shared publicly with WECA or in other places. You could put it online on your websites if you wanted to. Just present that information so that, as Rafi's saying, we can see the trends. But I think this is also something that when you're telling people that they have to pay $45, we're assuming that you guys have solved the problem with this plan. I don't know that we know that. I don't know if we have enough information to know that this plan is going to work 100%. I think people are absolutely going to get hit with these tickets, and I think it's going to be really, really harmful to their budgets. I really do. I think there's going to be a baseline number of people that get hit by this, at least for the first few weeks. So I think is that a possibility? Are you guys going to be tracking that? Because if this is a pilot, you would be extending it to the rest of the city. So you'd want to see what worked the best. But I think it's also, before you do start taking the punitive measures, which are again, people are struggling out here. I work in energy assistance, so I see it in a different way, but it's just one more thing. And I think for you guys to present that data publicly is going to be important so people can see what's going on. We have to understand that there's going to be a lot of people that this is not a solution. Like, they will not have a solution. There will be people every week that get hit with these tickets. And I just think we need to be really honest about that. But I would love to hear your response if you can share some of that data publicly and let us know how it's going before the punitive measures start really taking effect.
I'll be more than happy to share the warnings that we give on trash day.
I think, Gannon, through that month of June, we'll be able to tell on a weekly basis how many warnings we're issuing. And to the earlier point, that was,
well, we want to know also, though, is the question.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, what I'm coming to is that we'll be able to tell, and we can certainly share that via email through WECA, and get that disseminated out. We should see through that June grace period, I agree, what we should see is the number of warnings going down. If they're staying flat, then you're right, it's something we have to look at. Did we not pick the right streets? Is there, a better street than street X or street Y? Are we not getting the information out efficiently? Yeah, those are all things you would tend to look at in that lead up before you do the punitive measures. I mean, our ultimate goal is not to have to give, at least my ultimate goal is not to have to give anybody a ticket, right, and just create a system that works. I do agree with you that there will be people who get tickets. There's no way to make it 100% efficient and foolproof, but the goal is to minimize the punitive element and maximize the educational element.
I have a question. Are you planning on putting together some kind of a graphic, one-page brochure we can share on our social media platforms outlining this information, maybe add the QR code to that, and then we can start sharing that on our social media and then encourage people to share that with their neighbors and friends and on their Facebook pages?
Yeah, I think we could certainly
maybe
put that together.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
And the slides that you showed today, is somebody going to send those out to us?
Yeah, sure. I can send them to Kyle, and Kyle can.
Okay, good. Because they have the map, so we really need to have a map ability to look at the maps.
Yeah, I'll send the maps separately from the PowerPoint presentation because they're a little small in the PowerPoint. So we'll just send them along as individual PDFs, and they're on that website that the QR code links to as well. So,
and Kyle, you already have the maps in meeting info, don't you?
Yeah, we do. We have the high res PDF ones.
Oh, well,
Oh, that's
okay.
right.
online,
Yeah.
So we already have them, Rafi.
Oh, sorry, didn't know that.
I was going to give them to you twice just to make sure.
Yeah, we'll
Okay,
keep
I'll-
sending them out because that's the critical information.
Right.
You know, another thing that we could do as we come up to the changeover, and once we have the signs in place, you know, 3 weeks out, we could change the message that says, here's the street you could park. And on this day, warnings will cease. The next week, we can say, just a reminder, here's the streets you can park. And in 2 weeks, this is what will happen. And on the week before, we'll do the same. I think that, you know, as we move up to the actual launch date, when we've put them up and we're giving people warning, we can change the message to show the exact date that things are going to happen. And those cars that are on the street are the ones that are going to receive that message.
That's good.
Yep.
I don't think, Gannon asked the question if we have a contact for UConn Law School. I don't think we do, but I think your CSO does, and I'll reach out to the CSO to get that contact information.
Okay. What else do we need to cover here? Well, we have these gentlemen on the video. Yeah, I mean, I think we all agree communication's key on this. It is a change for a lot of folks, and so the more we can get it in front of them, the better chance we have of changing the behavior and trying to get the results we want, which is the trash and other things can be picked up smoothly on the day that the team's out there. All right, question from Heather. How many unpaid tickets result in a car being booted?
It is 3 past due citations. So you could get 3 tickets, but all 3 have to be past due, or it has to be 2 past due citations, and then you legally park on a 3rd time and you'll get booted.
All right. 2 past due plus 3rd offense.
Correct.
Or so you're saying if you get caught on the 3rd offense, then they might put the boot on then, or
As long
if
as
you
the
have
other 2
3
are past due.
or if you have 3 past due and you're parked legally,
That is
you could
correct.
still get the boot.
That is correct.
Okay. Okay. Any other questions for, oh, how many days is past due?
Usually 22 from the day, 22 days after your citation was issued, which is usually your appeal or your hearing date. And that's scheduled by Corporation Counsel, City of Hartford. So roughly 22 days later, if you have not either appealed it and had it waived and or paid it, it is considered past due.
Thank you.
Sorry, well, an appeal's pending, it's not past due.
If there is an appeal and it's pending, they will give, usually on your appeal day. So that's, you have an appeal day, which is 22 days. So if you've appealed it, or your hearing date has to, you have to be there on your hearing date and or appealed it prior to. And then on your ruling, if they rule in favor of you or the person that was getting the citation, they give you 30 days in which to pay the citation. And all of that is automatically calculated in our system.
So that it doesn't count as one of the
That is
3 items that would lead to booting.
Yeah. So if they find you guilty, they give you 30 days in which to pay. If you are in, and if they find you not guilty, then they just waive, they void the citation.
But in whatever time period it takes from the day of the ticket to the day of the hearing, and then the decision on the hearing, that doesn't show up as a citation
No,
against you.
because your hearing date is 22 days after, so that's why they give you that date. So it's a Tuesday or a Thursday, and usually those dates are calculated to fall on those dates. So you have to be there for your hearing and or have appealed it online prior to, so that it could fall within that category.
Oh, so when you file, okay, I didn't know that. When you file a parking appeal in Hartford, you already know your hearing date. Because it's like it's right on the ticket. It says you're going to have
That is
a
correct.
hearing
That
on
is
such
correct.
and such a date.
That is correct.
Okay.
All right, great. Any final questions before we adjourn?
And to Gannon's comment at the end, we are open. We do want to work with communities. As I made mention at the beginning, this is much bigger than just sanitation signs. It's really organizing signs throughout the city, which Mike said is decades past due. So we appreciate any help we can get from the neighborhoods. So thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you for the folks who attended. Like I said, we are going to try to get this up on the YouTube channel and out on social media, so folks who didn't attend tonight can still view the presentation and hear the conversation. And thank you to Mingo and Mike for participating and working with us as we kind of sort through some of these tricky issues. So
Before you leave, how broad is your community? What is your reach of information through the West End? WECA,
meaning
any
like,
organization? I'm just trying to see how many people you believe you can touch in the West End to get the information out through all of your channels.
yeah, I mean, our best
20.
channel is our email distribution list, which is about 1,400 names, 1,400
Okay.
email addresses. Most are in the West End, but not all. And then there's our Facebook page is, limited in terms of what we have in terms of followers, but there is a community Facebook page that we cross post onto that has about,
Okay.
I think, 4,000 members. So
Excellent.
that has a much broader reach within the community. And that's actually where a lot of the concerns and conversation about parking originated. So we share our events over there, and certainly this information will push over there as well to just try to maximize the exposure.
Thank you for that. And I'm hoping that you had a broader reach so that we can try to get as many people as possible. So thank you for that.
In Mingo, there's also, I guess it's a more or less monthly newspaper, the West Ender, that is, I'm not sure if they're still delivering door to door or not. They at least initially were delivering door to door, so that they're not sort of bound by what email addresses people have. And you may want to get information into that as well.
If you can help me with that, we will try to get information on that as often as we can, just again as repetition.
So what do you need for that?
Just who do I need to connect to? At least put a little blurb in there on a regular basis.
Okay.
Well, so Mingo, do you work with
Mingo, I'll send you some contact info.
Okay, thank you for that.
Do you have that? I mean, I assume Suzanne is the person you would.
you work with Hartford News?
Sparingly.
Okay, because Hartford News publishes the West Ender, and it's the same people. But if Guile said,
Exactly.
that'll be great.
Oh,
Then I can reach out to Mike McGarity as well.
Yeah.
yeah, Mike McGarry is the person to contact for that.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Thank you again, everyone, and have a wonderful evening.
Thanks.
Thank
you.